The desert night was wide and merciless, a sprawl of sand and shadow, where even the coyotes had gone quiet. The moon rode low, casting pale light across the jagged ridges and dry gulches. Wind carried the smell of sage and ash from some long-dead fire. In the emptiness, a lone rider came stumbling down the arroyo, his horse lamed, his body hollowed out by hunger and dust. His boots sank heavy into the sand as he dismounted, leading the animal by the reins. The man had no name worth speaking, only the shape of a drifter, lean, scarred, eyes haunted by 1,000 unspoken sins. He paused when he saw it, a campfire flickering in the distance, stubborn against the dark. The flames revealed a woman. She sat cross-legged on a blanket, rifle laid across her lap, the glow of the fire catching the iron set of her jaw. A dozen head of cattle shifted restlessly in the shadows behind her. She was not dressed like a lady of town nor a rancher's daughter, no corset, no silk, only a weather-stained duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat shoved low on her brow. Her hair was black, streaked with dust, her skin sunburnt bronze. The man froze, every instinct warning him away. Camps in the desert at night could belong to raiders, to bounty men, to worse. Yet hunger and exhaustion pushed him forward, one boot step at a time. The rifle rose, her voice cut through the wind. "That's close enough." The drifter's hand hovered at his hip, though his revolver hung heavy and useless with only 2 bullets left. His lips cracked as he spoke, the sound dry as gravel. "I ain't looking for trouble." "You found it just the same," she answered, steady. The barrel of her rifle gleamed in the firelight. He could see her better now, younger than her hardened posture suggested, though her eyes held no innocence. They were sharp, unyielding, carrying the weary fire of someone who had learned not to beg nor bow. She didn't lower the rifle. The drifter eased closer until the fire's glow painted his face. Shadows carved the lines of his cheekbones, the old scar at his temple, the tired weight that dragged at his shoulders. He let the silence stretch, the cattle's restless lowing filling the distance between them. At last the woman tilted her head, studying him as though weighing not his body, but his soul. Then she spoke, low, deliberate. "Drifter, are you here for blood, or for love?" The question hung in the night, sharp as a blade. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Her words had sliced too close, too true. Because in the hollow of his chest, where conscience and memory burned like old whiskey, he no longer knew which had carried him across the desert, the thirst for vengeance, or the hunger to feel something alive again. The flames cracked, scattering sparks into the black sky. The desert watched, vast and silent, as 2 outcasts measured each other across the circle of firelight, bound not by trust, not by mercy, but by the strange gravity of fate. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell icon. Stories like this deserve to be remembered. Dawn cracked the desert open with a blood-red sky. The first light touched the cattle, their hides steaming in the chill air, restless hooves stirring the dust. The fire from the night before was only embers now, smoke curling upward like a thin prayer. The drifter stood apart, hat brim low, scanning the horizon with eyes that never seemed to rest. He had learned to listen to silence, and silence this morning felt wrong. The woman, Isolde, knelt by the fire, loading cartridges into the chamber of her rifle with quick, steady hands. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You keep staring like the horizon owes you something." "It does," the drifter muttered, his voice flat. "Trouble always comes from there." As if summoned by his words, the horizon shifted. Dust plumes rising, faint at first, then swelling like a storm. Horses. Riders. Sunlight caught on steel, on rifles lifted high. Isolde's jaw set tight. "They've found me." The drifter didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. The look in her eyes, the weight in her shoulders, told him she had been hunted too long to mistake shadows for nothing. The raiders came hard. A dozen men, rough-bearded, with coats patched from old uniforms, Union blues torn into dusters, gray caps long faded, ghosts of the war still clinging to them. Their voices carried across the sand in hoots and curses, the thunder of hooves shaking the earth beneath the cattle. Isolde rose to her feet, rifle snug against her shoulder. "Keep your distance," she hissed at the drifter, though she knew already he would not. The herd panicked, hooves churning the ground into a storm of dust. Shots cracked. The smell of gunpowder burned sharp in the air. The drifter moved without thought. His revolver cleared leather in a blur, the bark of his first shot cutting down the lead rider before the man's shout reached its peak. The recoil jolted up his arm, but his face stayed carved from stone. Isolde fired too, each pull of her trigger clean and sure. She had the calm of someone who had fired into men before. The cattle bawled, scattering, some collapsing under stray bullets. Raiders charged through the dust cloud close enough that their faces came into view, sweat-streaked mouths twisted into wolfish grins. The drifter ducked behind a boulder, reloading with hands that trembled not from fear, but from the memory of too many mornings like this. War, border raids, ambushes. The smell of blood and dust had been the backdrop of his life. He thought he had left it behind, but violence had a way of finding him, like a shadow tied to his back. Isolde's hat flew from her head as a bullet tore past. She cursed, hair whipping in the wind, then leveled her rifle again and dropped another man from his saddle. She didn't stop, didn't falter even as one raider shouted her name. "Blackthorn! You thought you could steal and hide? You'll burn for this." Her face hardened, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. This wasn't just theft. This was personal. The drifter's chest tightened. He could walk away now, let her fight and fall, save his own skin. It would be easier. Cleaner. Instead, he rose from cover, gun spitting fire into the storm. A rider toppled, screaming as he hit the ground. Another turned his horse, blood spraying from his shoulder. The drifter moved like a man born to it. Each shot measured each step toward the fire line, reckless yet sure. When the dust finally began to settle, silence fell again. Only the wind moved, dragging the smell of cordite and iron through the broken camp. 4 raiders lay dead. 3 more wounded groaned in the dirt. The rest had fled, their shouts fading into the barren horizon. Isolde leaned on her rifle, chest heaving, eyes locked on the drifter. For the first time since she had met him, her voice trembled. "You've done this before." He wiped the sweat and grit from his brow, holstered his revolver, and gave her nothing but silence. Her hand tightened on the rifle. "Men don't shoot like that unless war carved it into them. You ain't no lost wanderer. You're something else." The drifter turned, walking toward the horse that had staggered to its knees in the chaos. He lifted its reins, steadying the trembling beast, though his hands shook as he did. Not from exhaustion, but from the old ghosts clawing up through his ribs. Isolde stepped closer, close enough to smell the smoke clinging to him. Her voice was softer now, though no less sharp. "Who are you, really?" The drifter's jaw worked, but no words came. He only looked at her, eyes dark, rimmed with everything he couldn't confess. The cattle were scattered, the camp destroyed. The sky burned gold now, the sun rising full. They were alone, exposed, and blood marked the sand in every direction. Isolde looked to the horizon, then back at him. "They'll be back, and with more. If I stay, I die. If you stay..." She stopped, waiting. The drifter pulled his hat low, cinched the saddle tight on his lamed horse. He didn't look at her when he finally spoke. "Then we ride." And so they did. 2 fugitives cutting into the open. The desert night closed in like a clenched fist. Stars hung sharp as nails above the wasteland, the silver light painting the sand with cold fire. Wind howled through the bones of the hills, rattling dead brush and broken stones. An abandoned mining shack clung to the edge of a ravine, its roof half-caved, its door hanging on a rusted hinge. It offered no more than 4 walls against the night, but in the desert 4 walls could mean the difference between death and a chance at morning. The drifter shoved the door closed with his shoulder. His horse stood tethered outside, ribs showing through the hide, while inside the shack the air smelled of dust, iron, and old coal. The single lantern Isolde had lit cast their shadows long against the timber walls, like 2 phantoms returned from graves. She sat on the floorboards, coat stripped off, sleeve torn to bare her arm. A graze along her skin still wept blood. She pressed a rag to it, grimacing as she worked. "You'll scar," the drifter said. "I already carry worse," she replied, eyes flicking to him. "Sit down. You're bleeding more than me." His shirt was torn at the ribs, dark with blood where a bullet had carved shallow. He lowered himself onto a crate, every movement stiff with pain. She crossed the floor with steady steps, kneeling before him. Her hands were rough, calloused, but careful as she lifted the fabric away. The drifter flinched at the sting of alcohol. She smirked faintly. Big man falls apart over a little burn. He didn't smile. His gaze drifted past her shoulder, out into the night through the broken wall. Burns I can take. It's the memories I can't stomach. Her hand paused, cloth pressed against his wound. Silence sat between them, heavy as stone. Then softly she said, Tell me then, what ghosts do you carry? The drifter's eyes lowered. His jaw worked, resisting, but the night had stripped him raw. He felt the weight of her stare, an unflinching, demanding. And for once he let the words slip. I rode for the Confederacy. Not for glory, not for cause. Just because I was born in the wrong place at the wrong time. I thought it was a man's duty. Then I saw what men did under that flag. Families cut down, villages burned. Tribes driven into rivers and slaughtered when they wouldn't move. His voice cracked low as gravel. I deserted. Left them in the dust. But I never left what I saw. Isolde's face didn't soften. She only nodded, slow, as if she understood the weight of blood on one's hands. My mother was Mexican, she said after a moment. She died when I was 12. Not in war, but in a raid. Bandits rode through and put a torch to the house. My father pulled me from the fire and never looked back at her. He remarried a white woman in town, and with that I was no longer his daughter. Half-blood, they called me. Not enough of one thing to belong anywhere. Her eyes lifted to meet his. They glistened, but they did not break. So I learned to live outside their world. To steal when I had to fight when I must. Better to be outlawed than invisible. The drifter studied her, the lantern light painting her face in bronze and shadow. She was fierce, scarred, unbent by shame. You hate them, he said. I hate being forgotten, she corrected. Hate being told I was born wrong. But hate doesn't feed you. It only keeps you warm at night. Her hand lingered on his ribs longer than needed, her breath brushing close. His eyes flicked to her lips, then back to the floor. The air between them thickened with something neither could name aloud. The lantern hissed as oil burned low. Outside, coyotes yipped into the void. Inside, they sat close enough to touch, yet neither moved. She spoke first, voice low as confession. We are alike, you and I. Marked by the sins of others, yet carrying the blame ourselves. He lifted his gaze to her. For a moment, the pain in his eyes gave way to something else. Longing, dangerous, and forbidden. But he said nothing. And she leaned back, drawing the rag from his wound. Her eyes shuddered once more. The silence returned, heavy, suffocating, filled with the words they would not say. Outside, the desert stretched endless. Inside, two ghosts sat by firelight, bound by secrets and scars, circling the edge of a desire they dared not claim. The night passed like that, still, aching, alive with what could never be spoken. And when dawn crept pale over the broken hills, neither had slept, but both knew something had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something older, something hungrier, stirring in the shadows of their souls. The desert night trembled with a sound of hooves. Wind drove grit across the flats, carrying the iron rhythm of men riding hard. In the abandoned shack, the drifter felt it first in his bones, the vibration of law and vengeance closing in. He glanced at Isolde, her face pale in the dying firelight, eyes wide but unflinching. They stepped outside. The sky was bruised violet, the horizon lined with silhouettes. Riders fanned wide, rifles slung, spurs glinting in the last stretch of day. At the front, straight-backed in his saddle, rode Sheriff Caleb Warren. His badge caught what little sun remained, flashing like judgment itself. Isolde, the sheriff called, his voice cutting the silence. You've run far enough. That herd you claim, it ain't yours. Never was. Her jaw tightened. They branded over my mark, Caleb, you know it. You were there when my father passed it down. You watched me drive those cattle myself. They stole from me. Same men riding at your side. The posse shifted uneasily, but Caleb didn't flinch. His gaze wasn't on the herd. It was on her. You could have made peace, Isolde. You could have asked for mercy. But instead you hid yourself with him. His eyes flicked to the drifter, heavy with scorn. A deserter, if I've ever seen one. A man with no country, no name worth carrying. You choose him and you damn yourself with him. The drifter said nothing. His chest burned with old shame, but the weight of her silence pressed harder. He watched Isolde, the way her hand brushed the frayed hem of her dress, steadying herself as if drawing steel from the motion alone. Caleb, she said, Voice low but sharp. Don't pretend this is about law. You left me in that churchyard begging you to stand by me. You walked away because your reputation meant more than my life. Don't come here now and talk of mercy. The words struck deeper than any bullet. Caleb's jaw clenched, his horse tossing restlessly under the tension of its rider. Dust swirled, caught in the evening wind. A crow passed overhead, its shadow slicing across the ground between them. The drifter stepped forward, slow, deliberate, his boots sinking in the grit. You want me gone, he said, voice roughened by both sand and memory. That's easy enough. I can turn my horse east before dawn and vanish. But don't call this justice. Don't pretend you're defending the law when you're just chasing ghosts of what you lost. Caleb's face hardened. You don't know me, stranger. No, the drifter replied. But I know men who let pride hang heavier than truth. I watched it on the battlefield, when flags mattered more than the blood soaking the dirt. And I see it here now. Silence pressed like a stone. The posse's rifles hung in uncertain hands. Isolde's breath caught. She knew this moment was the breaking point. Whether the drifter would cut himself free or tether his fate to hers. With all the ruin that would follow, the wind shifted, carrying the sharp scent of creosote and dust. He turned to her, and in her eyes he saw both defiance and fear, the fragile line between survival and surrender. He exhaled slowly. I've been running all my life, he murmured, almost to himself. Then louder, to the sheriff. Not this time. The declaration cracked the air like a gunshot. Caleb's face darkened, his hand twitching toward his holster, but he stopped himself. The posse behind him hesitated, unsettled by the fracture between law and loyalty. The sun bled out across the horizon, staining the sky with fire. Shadows stretched long, wrapping the shack, the riders, the outcasts, in a single suffocating stillness. Isolde lifted her chin, the dusk painting her face with both sorrow and resolve. Then let it be known, she said, her voice carrying across the flats. I stand with the man who stayed, not the one who left. The desert answered only with wind. The chains rattled like bones dragged through dust. The drifter and Isolde were hauled down Main Street beneath the noon sun, wrists bound in iron, clothes torn, faces streaked with grit. Children clung to their mothers wide-eyed. Men leaned on porch rails, some sneering, some silent. The bell above the church tolled, not for worship, but for judgment. They were forced onto the gallows platform, not yet fitted for hanging, but high enough for the crowd to see every word that passed their lips. Sheriff Caleb stood below, his badge gleaming like it had swallowed the sun, his voice rising over the murmurs. People of Red Hollow, he declared, you see before you a thief and a deserter, a woman who plotted to steal from honest men, and a drifter who aided her in crime. The law demands we settle this. Isolde's chin lifted, shadow carving strength into her features. Her voice, sharp as broken glass, cut across the square. You call me thief, Caleb Warren, but what did you call it when your men burned my family's brand from our herd? When they laughed and spat that I had no claim because my mother was Apache? I was born on that land, raised with sweat and fire. But you let them strip it away because the town could not stand the thought of a woman, of me, holding what they coveted. Gasps shivered through the crowd. Some women nodded, faces tight with recognition of betrayal. Men muttered uneasily. Caleb's jaw flexed, his hand resting near his revolver, but he did not silence her. Her words rolled like thunder. You left me in the dust, Caleb. You who once swore you'd stand beside me. You chose your reputation over truth, and now you drag me here not for justice, but because my existence wounds your pride. The drifter had stood silent, eyes downcast, but now the crowd's restless noise pulled him forward. His voice was low at first, dry as desert wind. You think I stand here because I wanted trouble? He raised his head, his gaze sweeping the faces. Farmers, shopkeepers, wives, sons. I deserted an army that massacred women and children. I fled because I could not put another bullet through the innocent and call it duty. I have carried that shame like a yoke across every mile since. The crowd shifted, some with anger, others with dawning unease. I saw Isolde hunted not for theft, but for being inconvenient. For being unfit in your eyes to hold what was hers. I couldn't walk away this time. Not when the same cowardice that ruined me was about to ruin her. The silence cracked. A woman shouted, "Let her speak." Another spat at the sheriff's boots. A ranch hand cursed the drifter as a liar. The street broke into two halves. One stirred to fury, the other to defense. Caleb's voice thundered above them, desperate. They twist words. She's a deceiver. He's a traitor. The law will not bow to shame. His hand yanked free his revolver, silver catching the sun. Justice is their execution. The crowd lurched. Men pulled rifles, fists clenched, dust erupting under boots as anger boiled over. Shots cracked, wood splintered, glass shattered. The gallows shook under the chaos. The drifter lunged, dragging Isolde down as Caleb fired. The bullet seared past her head, embedding in the post. Blood spattered, not hers, not his, but one of the deputies falling with a scream. The crowd erupted in blind panic, gunfire spraying wild. Isolde's chains rattled as she seized a fallen knife, cutting herself free with trembling ferocity. The drifter swung a broken beam like a club, smashing into the deputy who blocked their way. Dust and blood stung his eyes, but he felt her hand seize his wrist, dragging him through the fray. They tore through the crowd, the roar of chaos at their backs. Caleb's curses rang out, his shots wild in the storm of shouting and gunfire. Townsfolk scrambled, some fighting, some fleeing. The square a boiling sea of rage and dust. The drifter and Isolde staggered into an alley, bloodied, lungs burning, chains hanging loose like the ghosts of their trial. The desert wind howled through the gaps between buildings, carrying smoke and cries. They collapsed against the adobe wall, her hair wild, his chest heaving, both alive by a threat of fate. Through the smoke, the setting sun bled across the sky, a fiery wound stretching over Red Hollow. The desert swallowed them whole. Dust on their lips, blood on their hands, iron still clinging faintly at their wrists. Yet they ran, stumbling into the vast emptiness where only the wind bore witness. The town's shouts faded behind them, swallowed by distance and sand. Only the night remained, a deep, eternal silence broken by the rasp of their breath, the clatter of hooves as their stolen horse gave out, collapsing beneath them. They pressed on by foot until their bodies refused. At last, beneath a wash of silver stars, they fell. The earth was cool, coarse with sagebrush and rock. The moon painted Isolde's face in pale firelight, her dark eyes wide, her chest heaving as though each breath fought to keep her alive. The drifter leaned against the sand, every bone aching, the copper taste of blood still at the back of his throat. For a long time, neither spoke. The desert did the speaking, coyotes in the far dark, wind crawling like fingers across the plain, stars wheeling endlessly overhead. Then she turned her head toward him, her voice stripped of all armor. Drifter, are you here for blood or for love? The question was the same as the one she had thrown across the campfire that first night. But now it was no challenge, no test. Now it was an ache, his jaw clenched. He closed his eyes, seeing flashes of the past. Women screaming in burning fields, the crack of rifles, the hollow echo of running from it all. He saw her too, fierce, abandoned, bleeding but unbroken, standing beside him when he should have ridden away. I don't know anymore, he whispered, voice cracking. Maybe vengeance kept me walking this far. Maybe you did. Maybe both. Her hand brushed his, tentative, trembling but steady in its intent. Then let the desert decide. Slowly, painfully, they turned toward each other. Their lips met, not with hunger but with the fragile promise of two souls who had nothing left but each other. The kiss was salt and blood, starlight and silence, and it bound them more surely than iron ever could. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. Tomorrow, he murmured, we may be hunted again. Tomorrow may take everything. She nodded, her fingers curling into his shirt, clutching as if to anchor herself. But tonight we belong to no one but ourselves. The stars stretched endless above them, a cathedral of silver. The desert held its breath. And for that fleeting, fragile night, two outcasts lay side by side and not broken, not judged but bound by defiance, desire, and the faint glimmer of redemption. The wind rose, carrying their secret into the dark. That was my story. If it reached you, tell me what you felt. Don't let silence bury us again. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and tell me where in the world you're listening from.